And we're back. Mike and Mike here on the Fantasy Sports Network. This is This Week in Fantasy Baseball. And Mike and I are going to go through our all-time fantasy team from our youths.
Our youths?
Problems with that word.
Did you say youths?
Yeah, something like that. All right, let's get right to it. We'll go position by position. I'll throw out the position. You name a player, and then I'll name a player, and we'll go on. We'll pick an entire fantasy team. So we're going to start out with our catching position. We're picking two catchers. So give me your first catcher for your team. It can't be anybody within the last couple of years.
No, I was thinking.
And you had to be alive too.
75 through
75.
Through
That's all right.
80s.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good.
So I would go with Johnny Bench.
Johnny Bench. You know what? I too had Johnny Bench. How could you not have Johnny Bench?
Yeah, Johnny Bench was one.
So we have
premier
a common
catcher,
theme here.
Part of the Big Red Machine. Great.
I'm curious to see how many we're going to have alive here. So,
and this is where I struggle. I'll give you the three names that I considered.
Yeah.
Thurman Munson.
Okay.
Carlton Fisk.
Okay.
And Gary Carter.
To me, Fisk was more of a longevity play.
Perfect analogy.
You know,
and he kind of got better as he got older.
Yeah, it wasn't that he was. He just was never, to me, the dominant player at his position.
No, absolutely. And like you said, he just played through decades, 3 decades pretty much. Incredible player. With the Red Sox, great fit. Always that rivalry with him and Thurman Munson, who is better. Fisk being a much bigger presence and everything. And had some great years with the White Sox, too. And he changed his number from 27 to 72 when he went to the White Sox. Thurman Munson, perennial all-star, 3 straight 100 RBI seasons. High average, always 300 almost, 290 career average. So I eliminated Fisk. I went between Munson and Carter. Carter had more of the power. So I would have to say Carter over Munson.
Really? All right.
You agree
I actually went with Munson.
You did go with Munson.
I went with Bench Munson.
Okay.
Essentially, both Bench and Munson and Carter are now gone.
Yeah, and the 70s, you look at the catchers you had in the 70s, Bench, Munson, and Fisk. That's incredible. We haven't seen anything like that since then, really, as far as catchers go. And then Carter was the best catcher in the 80s by far.
Yeah, he was.
Without question, Gary Carter, the kid, was the best catcher in the 80s, and great defensive catcher for a bunch of years. So, you give up the power with Munson that you don't get with Carter.
Now Carter had a much better career than Munson, but that had to do with the Munson's career was cut short.
It was cut short in the tragic plane crash, August 2nd, 1979. I remember where I was. I was at a baseball camp in Pennsylvania, and one of the coaches came up to me. He knew what a big Yankee fan I was and told me. And I remember watching the game against the Baltimore Orioles at Yankee Stadium the night they honored Munson, and there was just complete silence. Everybody was crying in the room watching this, and it was something very surreal. I actually still have all the newspapers from when Munson died.
Yeah, I was on vacation with my parents. I was in L.A. at the time. I got one for you. Who was the catcher in the first game back when Munson wasn't in the lineup? Who caught that game? He was the starting catcher.
It had to be Jerry Narron.
It was Jerry Narron.
And Munson too, though. But you talk about Munson's career being cut short. The year before in '78, he had terrible injuries, catching all those games. Wasn't DHing, shoulder injuries and the like. Only hit 6 home runs in 1978. He only had 3 home runs before he passed away in '79. So I don't think Munson had more than 2 years left. So borderline Hall of Famer. You really have to look at the numbers.
He just didn't have it long enough.
It wasn't long enough, but boy was he impactful, and he was an incredible catcher.
Yeah. The catching skills.
One year he made one error, and it was because he got knocked out at home plate on a collision at home plate.
Do you remember when I was a kid? Whether it was little league or in the major leagues, all the catchers had the orange shin guards, now every team, everything is personalized, color coded.
Right, and also they just wear their cap behind the mask.
Turn it back. Well, it was the older style mask, not the hockey mask.
Not just that, but just no helmet. Munson never wore a helmet. He had the cap. He didn't have the helmet on top. Munson was as tough as they come. Him and Fisk both tough. Bench, an incredible player. Just an addendum to Bench and Munson, after the 1976 World Series when both Bench and Munson batted above 500, of course, the Reds swept the Yankees in 4 straight games. Munson had an incredible series for the Yankees, was the only one that really showed up and hit. And Sparky Anderson made the remark as Bench won the MVP that, Munson really can't compare to Bench, and that really hurt Munson.
But unfortunately, I think he's right. I think Bench was head and shoulders above everybody, and then everybody was second.
Well, Munson, batted about 40, has a career average about 40 points higher than Bench, though. To be honest, that's
the
a lot.
Power and the RBI, he did have a bet. Listen,
Munson,
from a fantasy perspective, Munson offered certain things that Bench didn't. So I think I would still take.
Bench would hit at least 15 to 20 home runs more than Munson would in the season. At his best, Munson would hit 20 home runs. At his best, usually between 15 and 20.
All right, let's move on to the outfielders. Okay. Give me. We got to pick 5 outfielders. So give me an outfielder.
So again, I'm thinking 1975 on. So it's past the Mays and Aaron and everything. So that's my thoughts.
Okay.
So I'm going with Reggie.
Okay.
Dusty Baker.
Let me write this down there. Reggie.
Dusty Baker.
Dusty. Now, Dusty didn't play with the toothpick in his mouth when he played, did he? Just only when he managed.
I don't think so. Again, I'm reaching back to the Big Red Machine, and of course, it was pre-Met days. George Foster.
George, 53 home runs? 52?
52 home runs
Foster?
in 1977. And he was.
And then the Mets came.
And ironically, he was the first person to hit 50 home runs since I believe Mays did it in the mid-'60s. And it wasn't done again until Cecil Fielder, Big Daddy, did it again in 1990, as I recall.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
Cecil Fielder hit 50 home runs, and that's. You didn't hit 50 home runs,
right?
But now Sosa hit 60 home runs 3 times. McGuire twice. Bond,
Brady Anderson hit 50 home. Yeah.
So number 4 would be Dave Winfield. Again, a rocket for an arm too in the outfield. Okay. Tremendous athlete. Drafted as well by the Minnesota Vikings and basketball too as well. 3-sport athlete. Yep. And here's what I was looking around and I was debating who else would you put in there. And I selected Dale Murphy.
You know what? It's funny. I'll tell you about Murphy in a minute.
And Murphy, unfortunately, played.
He's on that Hall of Fame thing.
Bubble,
he's getting the votes, and he's
I believe he has 398 career home runs. I'll check that.
He had 2 MVPs.
Yeah, look, there was nothing to root for.
Something he just tailed off though, too quickly.
He tailed off at the wrong time, just when the Braves were about ready to get good, and that was kind of the end of his career. But Murphy, they had nothing in Atlanta except for him. They had that one season in 1982. Joe Torre was a manager, but they lost in 3 straight. But Murphy was a tremendous player, and again, great arm. And I used to play Stratomatic, and he was always a 1 in center field. That means he was the best.
He was a great ball player. He was a great ball player.
And Reggie, too, in his Oakland days, was great as well in the outfield until he came to the Yankees and decided he forgot to bring his glove to the outfield.
Yep.
398 home runs for Murphy, so I was bang on with that.
All right, I've got my 5. Now, I went a little old school. I included some of the older players when I was a kid. My favorite player of all time was Willie Mays. So I had to put Willie Mays. Now, unfortunately, I only saw him towards the end of his career. I only saw him at
when he was falling down with the
when that was the worst, when he was begging at home plate in the World Series and so I have Willie there. I also have Hank Aaron on there.
Yeah.
Now, Hank Aaron played a little longer after that, but I couldn't not put them on. But I have Tim Raines on there. The way he ran and the amount of stolen bases from a fantasy standpoint,
it was insane. Yeah.
And there was just not much happening like that at the time. And in the same vein, I had to put Ricky Henderson there, who combined some of the power with that speed. You can tell I'm going to be looking for speed in my draft.
Right.
And Eric Davis, Eric the Red.
Yes. Excellent choice.
He was
very similar to Dave Winfield in the style of play.
Yeah, he was a childhood friend of Darryl Strawberry, and he was unbelievable. You look at one of his seasons when he was in his prime. Look at the amount of home runs he had in his best year, and how many stolen bases in that same year. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna guess it was more than 70 bases he stole. And more than 30 home runs in the same year.
Eric Davis,
what was his best year?
Eric Davis, like Winfield, was a 5-tool player by far. Just looking up his numbers here. Hold on 1 second.
I'm going to say 34 home runs, 70 stolen bases.
Lacerated his kidney too,
and they made him pay for his own plane ticket home.
Marge
Schott.
Yeah, thank you.
She
very
flew
much.
the dog first class, but
you look at the numbers here for
what was his best year?
Let's see: 37, 100, 293, 26, 93, 273, 34, 101.
And how many stolen bases when he hit 37 home runs, 100 RBI?
He had 80 stolen bases in 86 before he hit the 37. Then he had 50 with the 37. And then he had 26 home runs, 35 stolen bases. Then he started to go down. He did have 35 stolen bases again in 1993 when he went to the Dodgers.
Yeah, but his home runs were. But,
sorry,
but,
92.
but for a time
92.
period there, the power and the speed,
Yeah.
and Ricky Henderson had some power but he didn't have the RBIs,
Right.
and he didn't have that kind of power.
No,
he wasn't close to 40 home runs. But I mean, he was, 70 stolen bases, 100 RBIs. That's a hell of a season.
No, look, Eric Davis. You can't say anything about Davis, and he did it naturally too. He did
Pete
it naturally.
Rose, in an interview said one time when people are counting money, Eric Davis is going to be weighing his. That was his quote early on in his career.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Talking about great athlete. Dusty Baker obviously wasn't the athlete that Rose was, but he had some nice numbers in his day. Baker with the late time with the Dodgers and everything, so he put up some nice numbers too. Best year, 30 home runs, 86 RBIs, 291 in 1977.
That's if he took the toothpick out.
That's when those Dodgers teams just had so much power between him and Reggie Smith.
Were you a Dodgers fan at
I
all?
wasn't a Dodgers, but I admired them. I mean, you look at that team.
They had that infield that was together the longest ever. They had Garvey,
Lopes, and Say.
And the shortstop, Russell.
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 How could you forget
the Penguin, Ron Say.
You had Rick Monday on that team. I mean, you had Reggie Smith in the outfield with 32 home runs. It was a great team.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to. I tell you what, Dale Murphy. I had Dale Murphy actually as my utility player. I had to put him on there. I know he fell just shy of the Hall of Fame voting this season. And I don't think he played long enough at that level. It's kind of the Don Mattingly syndrome. He's Hall of Fame caliber for when he was in his prime. It just wasn't for a long enough period. Mm-hmm. But he did win 2 league MVPs, and I don't know if there's any guys who won 2 league MVPs who are not in the Hall of Fame. So maybe he's got a shot. I don't know.
Look, he played on a horrible team. That's the problem.
Who do you have for your utility guy?
Well, I went strictly utility. I didn't take a player and put him as utility. I went utility. I thought Lee Mazzilli was a great utility player with the Mets teams in the 80s.
He was ambidextrous, by the way.
Yeah. So
he was.
I don't know if it helped him at the plate.
Well,
he
switched it. He switched it. But he's
yeah. So I thought more when utility. I thought like a true utility player. I put Lee Mazzilli.
I used to think they were having a contest. Who could wear the tightest uniforms between him and John Stearns? And they were both muscular and tight.
Stearns' career was cut short. He was a hell of a catcher, and unfortunately, if he didn't get hurt,
player too.
If he didn't get hurt, they called him the dude.
Yeah.
If Stearns didn't get hurt, they probably never go out and get Gary Carter.
Yeah, maybe.
Because Stearns was pretty young at the time, and they were confident in him. He could run the bases too.
All right, let's move on to first base.
Wait a second, you don't have Reggie Jackson on there?
No.
How did you have Reggie Jackson?
Where am I going to fit him? I'm not putting him ahead of Mays. I'm not putting him ahead of Aaron. I need stolen bases. I'm not putting him ahead of Raines or Ricky Henderson.
I think you got to let Henderson or Raines go and put Reggie in
No.
there. What do you mean no?
How many? He didn't. He actually did run a little bit.
Reggie stole 20 bases in
his
his
he did. He actually did. No, I only got 5 guys.
I made a mistake. I was thinking I kind of peaked.
I don't
peaked
think
in the
Dusty
mid-80s.
I don't think Baker qualifies. I think
I like to do a switch. I like to switch Henderson with Baker, but I kind of stay between.
You can't switch.
Well, I want to switch. I stayed between 75 and 86. You went outside of 86.
I did go.
Yeah, you went a little high for me. That's why.
All right. So give me first base.
First base. Where is first base? Two. Okay. Got power or average, and I was kind of torn between Steve Garvey, Rod Carew, and I threw in Cecil Cooper. So if I was going to go with 2, I'd go with Garvey and Carew.
Cooper, was he number 0?
Coop?
I think he was 0. You know what? Here's my thing with Rod Carew, and he reminds me a lot of Joe Mauer, or Joe Mauer reminds me of him. And it's not a looks like Tarzan plays like Jane thing. They fantastic average. Well, actually, Carew ran early in his career. They played some second base too, but he just the power wasn't there. So to play first base and have
the guy hit 330 though. He hit 388, 1977.
You know what? If he stayed at second base, I would have been fine at that. But to have him over, to me, that's got to be a power position.
Mike, listen, it's 1969, 332, 1970, 366, 71, 307. 72, 318, 350.
Yeah, but how many home runs and RBIs? How many home runs and RBIs? Read them.
333.
And he ran. He had some stolen bases too. But how many home runs and RBIs in those same years?
Oh, yeah, like his best was 77, 16 home runs, 100 RBIs. So he did.
You know, it's funny. I didn't even realize he got 100 RBIs.
Yeah, no, he had 80, 90, 170, mostly around 10 home runs. I'll give you that. Runs, he only hit 100 once, which is surprising. And stolen bases, solid, but nothing spectacular. Best was 49.
No, but
in
at that
76.
time, at that day and age, people weren't running like what Willie Mays always says. I could have stole 70 bases if they let
yeah.
me, but baseball was different. It was different. All right, when we come back, we're going to round out the rest of our rosters.
Round out the rest of our roster.
We're going to round out the rest of our rosters. We'll be back here on This Week in Fantasy Baseball in just a moment.